Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Westside Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Ellen Greenwood. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I do want to give a warm welcome to each one of you, whether you are with us here in person this morning or whether you are watching this service from home online. We are very, very happy to have you with us. Westside is a congregation that welcomes you no matter what faith tradition you claim, no matter what faith tradition you have left behind, no matter what pronouns you use, no matter what mood you're in this morning. You know, you may be in the happiest mood that you can imagine because it's a beautiful day and the sun is shining and the flowers are blooming. And we all should have a little bit of that, but sometimes we're just grumpy anyway, or sometimes we're just frazzled anyway, and it doesn't matter. You're welcome here, and we will spend some time together and be more enriched for it. There are some announcements that I believe the folks watching from home have seen scrolled across your screen. And I hope you have read those carefully. There are some announcements in your order of service. If you are here in person, please do take the time to read those over. If you need to remind yourself of any of these details at any other time, our weekly newsletter is always the go-to place to find information. If you don't get our weekly email newsletter, let one of our greeters know or our administrator, and we will make sure that you get on our email list. But check that out because that's how to find out what's going on at Westside. Also, our website can be very informative that way too. I do want to say that we hope all of you will stay for coffee and conversation after the service this morning. It's a way for us to get to know you if you're new and catch up if you've been here a while. And then if you are a member, please stay after our coffee time because we do have a congregational meeting this morning that is very important to the ongoing life of Westside, and we hope that everyone will stay for that. So, are there any other announcements?
Linda has one.
Yes, Linda, Madam President.
I just wanted to make a pitch for the crafts group, which is meeting next Sunday. It will be the last time we'll be meeting on Sunday. I was only doing that because of the VITA taxing being taking over the room on Saturday. So in May we'll start meeting on Saturday again, but next week we're meeting on Sunday, 1 o'clock. Thanks.
Thank you, Linda. Our minister, the Reverend Carol Bordeaux, is out of town this week. So if you are brand new with us and you have not heard Reverend Bordeaux speak or have not had a chance to meet her, I do hope you will come back and do that. But we have a long tradition at Westside of what I think are very excellent lay-led services. And we have one of those this morning. Morgan Ringelspaugh, who is a member of our Welcoming Congregation Renewal team, has put this service together, and I'm going to turn this over to Morgan at this time.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Whether you're here for the first time or you've been here a little bit, welcome. I'm glad to see everybody. As Ellen said, my name is Morgan Ringelspaugh. I use they, them pronouns. I wanted to take just the briefest of moments to introduce today's service. It was crafted, I think, as a team effort for the Welcoming Congregation Renewal team. Last week, Reverend Carroll spoke about transformation and change as opportunities for growth and learning. How can we take accountability for our mistakes in the past, acknowledge them, and continue forward? I can say that for myself, I was reminded of the importance of curiosity, of approaching the world with that childlike mind of wanting to understand something so thoroughly. Not that I could refute it or find its flaws, but just so that I know the topic. Today, we're going to take a little bit of time to engage with our inner child a bit, to wriggle into that mindset of curiosity and listening with an open mind and heart. Then we're going to do some more talk about the important work that we as a congregation are being called to do. We will have a story for all ages, so we invite all children or children at heart to come listen to the story when that time comes. Before we do any of that, though, we do have our gathering music this morning that the choir is going to help lead us in. We're going to sing hymn number 188 in your great hymnal, Come, Come, Whoever You Are. And we're going to do it once through all the way and then twice in a round. What? Towards the front. Wherever. You better join me. Thank you, everyone. And Ellen has our chalice lighting for today.
Oh, shoot, I'm sorry. I thought I left it. This morning, the words for our chalice lighting come to us from H.P. Rivers. H.P. Rivers is better known to those of us here at Westside as Helen Casara, who didn't quite grow up in Westside, but came of age spiritually, for sure, here at Westside. And they have now gone on to the seminary and are working on toward becoming a UU minister. And we are so extremely proud of Helen. And they are an amazing poet and write poems that they publish under the name H.P. Rivers. This one is called Blessed Are the Queer. Blessed are the wanderers seeking affirmation. Blessed are the worshipers praying from closets, pulpits, pews, and hardship. Blessed are the lovers of leaving family and familiarity, leaving tables where love is not served. Blessed are those who stay. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the queer, disciples of truth, living, breathing, sacred reflections of divine love.
I'll now invite the singing bowl to sing and ask you to settle into a attitude of reverence and listening and quiet.
And now if you would all stand and join us in singing number 118, This Little Light of Mine. And we don't really need the choir to come forward probably on this. I think we all know it. We're going to sing it a cappella because it's just that kind of a song. And so if Sandra will just give us a starting note. That was wonderful. Thank you.
All right, so it is story time. If anybody would like to come up here and listen to the story, I'm going to pull up a chair over here. Today we are reading Not Quite Narwhal. So if you want to see the pictures, which are absolutely beautiful, please, not just the kids, but anybody else who would like to come up here and sit in the front so we can all enjoy this story. Go over here so I'm closer to the mic. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Okay, so this is Not Quite Narwhal by Jesse Seema. Kelp was born deep in the ocean. He knew early on that he was different from the other narwhals. His tusk wasn't as long as everyone else's. He had different tastes in food, and he wasn't a very good swimmer. But his friends didn't seem to mind, so Kelp decided that he wouldn't either. That is, until he was swept away by a strong current. He's kind of being swept away and he goes, "Oh, I wish I were a better swimmer." Kelp found himself at the surface, closer to land than he'd ever been before. High up on a cliff, he spotted a mysterious, sparkling creature. It looked so familiar. It looked like kelp. Kelp swam toward land as fast as he could, which wasn't very fast at all. hoping that he could catch up with the creature that looked just like him. When he finally reached the shore, Kelp felt a little bit anxious. He had never left the ocean. He was nervous about walking for the first time, but the land creatures made it look so easy. We can see here he tries to learn how to walk like a crab, and he falls over. He tries to jump like a frog, and he falls over. It wasn't easy. Eventually, with the help of the turtle, he got the hang of it. Everything on land was so strange and beautiful, but also kind of scary. Kelp began to think he might never find the creature that looked just like him. But as he stumbled out of the forest, land narwhals actually were unicorns, and by the looks of it, so are you. Kelp had never heard of unicorns before. They taught him all sorts of new things about his tusk. We call them horns. Wow. They introduced him to unicorn delicacies, like the unicone. And they showed him how to gallop. There was no doubt that Kelp was, in fact, a unicorn. He was having so much fun that he didn't want to leave. But then he remembered all of his friends under the sea. Kelp missed them terribly, so he said goodbye to the unicorns and returned to the ocean. Come back soon. Kelp swam toward home as fast as he could, which wasn't very fast at all, hoping that the narwhals would like him now that he was a unicorn. When he finally arrived, Kelp had butterflies in his stomach. You can see, though, they made a welcome home sign, and they were clearly excited to see him. Kelp took a deep breath and told his friends the news. It turns out I'm not a narwhal. Of course you aren't. I'm a unicorn. We all knew that. They took it quite well. Kelp was happy to be home, but now that he'd experienced life on land with the unicorns, he couldn't seem to forget them. Did he want to be a land narwhal with the unicorns? Or a sea unicorn with the narwhals? Kelp couldn't decide. But then he realized that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to choose. The end.
There are so many different ways to contribute to Westside with our time and our efforts and our caring, but we do also need to support this church with our money. And at this point in our service, we will take an offering to support the good work of Westside, both here in our congregation and in the wider community. Our Share the Plate partner for this quarter is the bottom, which is a Black affirming bookshop and craft center and support center in downtown Knoxville. So please give generously. Thank you. Oh, and the choir is singing. Please come up. I assumed you knew that. Sorry.
While the choir gets organized, a little bit of background on the song they're singing is Love Has Already Won, written by Jason Shelton. Thank you, everyone. So that is one of the songs that I think of as almost like our go-to anytime we have a pride service or LGBTQ plus issues. We're singing Love Has Already Won. Whenever I hear that song here lately, I think about the disconnect between the lyrics and how reality feels lately. It's meant to be uplifting and consoling, a comfort to those who are hurting and who almost need to be held. The first stanza says as much. In the flash of hate and terror, in the sinful lie of fear, there's a yearning deep in every soul, a longing to hear. Love has already won. We want to be reminded that everything is okay. The battle is over, and in the end, love has triumphed. I first heard that song back in the summer of 2019 when Westside hosted the Pride Interfaith service. If you were not here that day, this room was packed. There were people from the community, from area churches, all kinds of people in this room. And the feeling when the choir sang, Love Has Already Won, was one of the most profound moments of my life. Now, just 4 years later, the song feels almost hollow, or perhaps overly privileged. To say that love has already won dismisses the reality of the work still ahead of us. That's the work we're talking about today. For the past few years, the Welcoming Congregation Renewal Team has occasionally read the names of individuals killed for simply existing in their authentic selves. This information is sourced from the Human Rights Campaign, which has collected this information since 2013. These numbers have slowly climbed over the years, peaking in 2021 at 57 transgender or gender nonconforming individuals killed. It's important to note that these numbers do not include those whose cause of death was unclear, those who were transgender or gender nonconforming but closeted, or those who were not recognized for who they are even in death. These numbers also do not account for the numbers of suicide. These numbers also do not reflect the increasing rates of hate crime, bullying, and intimidation faced by the LGBTQ+ community as a whole. As of this morning, the HRC reports 6 individuals so far have unfortunately made that list for 2023. But like I said, that does not reflect the amount of hate crime, bullying, or anything else that we are facing. For example, white supremacist groups have targeted pride events, including Drag Queen Story Hour at local libraries. It wasn't that long ago that members of this church witnessed such hatred at the Pride Parade here in Knoxville when a group of white supremacists showed up to protest. According to the HRC, nearly 1 in 5 of any type of hate crime is now motivated by anti-LGBTQ+ bias. That said, it's not just these extreme displays of hatred that we have to fight back against. As I said, those are extremes and not necessarily the everyday bigotry that someone in the community will face. The term microaggression can be defined as indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group. These microaggressions hurt, and they build up over time, eroding a person's sense of self-worth, their identity, and their fundamental right to exist as a human being, seeking their own truth and happiness. There is a YouTube video that I've seen shared multiple times where they describe microaggressions as mosquito bites. One isn't so bad, but over time you get bit again and again and again, and that's where the hurt comes from. These microaggressions can be something as simple as not having gender-inclusive restrooms in facilities, not using the proper name or pronoun for someone, or failing to include those members of the community in activities and decision-making. In my own experience, microaggressions stem from ignorance or apathy. If an individual is not informed about the impact their choices are making, how can they avoid the microaggressions? Or perhaps they are aware, but they simply don't care or pay attention to it because they don't believe it affects them or the people closest to them. In past years, a statistic has been floated around from GLAAD that approximately 20% of people say they know a transgender individual, 20% of Americans. A 2021 survey from the Pew Research Center, updates this to 42% of Americans who say they personally know someone who is transgender. And approximately 26% of Americans know someone who uses gender-neutral pronouns. My friends, if you were not a part of that statistic before, you are now. I use they, them pronouns, and I am non-binary. The same survey reports that 48% of Americans state that they would feel somewhat uncomfortable or very uncomfortable using gender-neutral pronouns. 48%. And this is where I believe the call to action comes in. This is where the need for education and conversation enters the scene. Let's think back to my friend, Kelp the sea unicorn and land narwhal. Kelp felt out of place, like he didn't quite fit in. He wasn't a good swimmer, his tusk wasn't long, he didn't like the foods, he didn't fit in to what was called a narwhal. He didn't have language for his own sense of identity. How must he have felt not fitting in with his peers and being so keenly aware that he didn't? By random circumstance, Kelp happened to see a unicorn standing on the shore when he got swept away. He caught the faintest glimpse and chased after it, hoping to find someone who looked like him. Kelp is able to get answers about his own identity and become more informed. He was able to obtain awareness of unicorns, and both as a concept and an option for a way of being. Of course he wasn't a narwhal. And we see how much happier he is, how much more he feels at peace with who he is at the end of the story. This story is particularly appropriate because Kelp realized for himself he didn't have to choose one or the other. He could be both or neither. He could just be Kelp. Kelp's story is not that much different than any other experience in the LGBTQ+ community. Oftentimes, we can feel out of place, wrong, or ashamed when we do not know that who we are isn't a bad thing. It isn't wrong. And the sooner we get that exposure to the other ways of existing, the sooner we find other land narwhals, the sooner we are able to find that joy and peace. This is the power of exposure to ways of existing other than our own. This is the power of representation and why we talk about it so often. Recently, I viewed a documentary that examines the history and impact of transgender individuals in film and TV. The documentary, titled Disclosure, is available on Netflix, and I highly recommend viewing it. The Welcoming Congregation Renewal team had actually talked about hosting a viewing for us as a congregation. I will say that was decided against only because of the amount of nudity and violence and how uncomfortable viewing that documentary can be. So please, viewer discretion is advised, but it is so worth it. I've watched it twice now, back to back, sitting in that uncomfortableness because of how important it is. I'm going to give you the highlights in case you don't get a chance to watch. Throughout the documentary, transgender actors, writers, producers, and advocates appear to discuss the impact of representation in the media. Earlier, I shared the updated statistic that approximately 42% of Americans say they know someone who is transgender or gender nonconforming. The original data, that 20%, was quoted in the documentary by Nick Adams, the GLAAD director of Transmedia and Representation, who goes on to explain how, for many individuals, their knowledge of transgender issues is rooted in what they see in the media. This is a quote from him. "For decades, Hollywood has taught audiences how to react to trans people. And sometimes they're being taught that the way to react to us is fear. That is to say that for many of us, our first experiences, historically as a society, has been through film. The documentary highlights the long-standing stereotypes of transgender individuals as somehow dangerous, immoral, often depicted as deranged serial killers. Actress and activist Laverne Cox opens the film with the following words. "I think for a long time, a very long time, the ways in which trans people have been represented on screen have suggested that we're not real, have suggested that we are mentally ill, that we don't exist. And yet here I am, yet here we are, and we've always been here." There's this idea that being gender nonconforming, non-binary, transgender is somehow new, and it isn't. I've given services before that explains and explores the history of the LGBTQ+ movement, and that dates back to ancient Egypt. It's nothing new. We've been here. We are here. And thus, we come back to the need for education and discussion, the continued raising awareness surrounding issues that are not our own. That is why we do these services and why we have these conversations. We come back to the need to widen the circle and to open our minds to the realities that are at hand, because those representations in the media that we see have historically been so misguided, and in many regards, simply wrong. We need to continue to amplify the voices of the LGBTQ+ community, because thus far, the public discourse has been dominated by those who do not know someone in the community, much less been the community voices themselves. The statistic of less than 20% of people knowing someone who is transgender or gender nonconforming was from just 5 years ago. Just 5 years. Think of the laws, the legislations, the current events that have happened in the past 5 years. The call right now goes beyond conversation and demands action of some kind. For so many people, being a supporter of a marginalized community has been putting a bumper sticker on your car or giving donations to community groups. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I am saying that there are ways we can do more. We may attend a pride parade or send a check to Knox Pride, but are we listening to the community we are looking to support? Have we spoken to someone and said, hey, how can I best support you right now? That is what we are looking to start doing more and more here at Westside. A little over a month ago, a new video game was released based on a beloved children's story. I'm not saying the name, but we're going to use context clues to figure it out. In the decade and a half since that series' conclusion, more and more people have realized that the author was anti-Semitic and a transphobic person who continually uses her fame and her platform to further attempt to restrict the rights of transgender individuals. Oddly enough, many regard her story of witchcraft and wizardry to be about inclusion and acceptance. Given that purchasing the video game would ultimately further benefit this person, many in the LGBTQ+ community simply asked that we not purchase the video game. We were asked to shed the invisibility cloak, as it were, and truth be told, that game coming out and this movement is what inspired this service. Right now, we are being asked yet again to take action, and this time, be visible about it. Make your voice and your opinion heard. Many of you have recently heard about the anti-drag bill that has been signed into law by Tennessee State Governor Bill Lee. If you haven't heard this bill, or this new law coming into effect, it's known as HB 9, and it seemingly restricts drag shows to adult-only indoor venues. However, the wording of this bill is deliberately vague and defines adult cabaret to include male and female impersonators who provide entertainment that appeals to a prurient interest. I don't know about you guys, but I'll be honest and say I had no idea what prurient meant. So I looked it up, and the legal definition of prurient is that which incites lasciviousness or lust. Let's go down the dictionary rabbit hole a little bit more, and we find lasciviousness to mean to indicate immoral sexual actions, and in certain cases, words or thoughts. So maybe not even doing something, but inspiring those somehow immoral thoughts in others. So the law is implicating morality in conjunction with what it calls male and female impersonators. Given the already dangerous misconceptions of transgender individuals as somehow immoral or wrong, it's no wonder that the transgender community fears this law will be used to legally condemn and disenfranchise them. The first offense for violating this law results in a misdemeanor and up to 12 months in jail, to say nothing of the fines you could face, while a second offense could be a felony offense, meaning that an individual's right to vote would be rescinded. Okay? All of that said, think about for a moment the implications for theater, for individuals who perhaps are neither male nor female. What does that mean for individuals living their daily lives? Terry Gross, the host of NPR's Fresh Air, conducted an interview with Memphis drag queen Bella Duvall, and thank you to Barry for letting me know about the existence of this one. I highly recommend giving this episode a listen to directly hear how the law could impact not only the livelihood of drag queens, but the implications for theater, arts, and so much more. Bella also gives information on calls to action surrounding this bill and other legislation, such as HB 1. HB 1 was signed into law the same day and restricts gender-affirming care for youth. This is not surgery. This is medication. This is therapy. This is something that an individual with their parents should be able to discuss and decide with their healthcare providers. HB 1 bans gender-affirming care for youth, including that medication and that therapy. The Human Rights Campaign has a breakdown of the two bills and their implications for the community, as well as suggestions on actions we can take, okay? Now, Knox Pride here in Knoxville does have a protest coming up in conjunction with these. For purposes of safety reasons, I will not disclose those on an online platform. Come talk to me after the meeting today, but you can also look it up online, Knox Pride. And they are asking for as much community support as possible on this, okay? It's a chance to be seen and heard. You can always, of course, call your legislators, send postcards, all of that, usual kinds of ways that we think about. But let's bring it back to this moment, back to this community right here, because individually, we may donate to the HRC or read a book or see a documentary. But imagine what we could do together. What would it look like for us as a whole, this group of people sitting here and watching us on YouTube right now? What would it look like for us to enact change in our own community? Earlier in the year, we talked a lot about reproductive justice. We had surveys that went out that assessed how comfortable we are with certain risk categories and passed around the surveys to get congregational feedback. Simply put, we wanted to ask and know what the congregation is comfortable with us as an institution saying and doing. Since those general surveys, we've compiled a more specific survey that asks the question, how comfortable and how willing are you to do this specific thing? And there's lots of different suggestions and questions and topics and categories covered. The more specific surveys will hopefully be going out later this week, both online in the newsletter, and we are aiming to have physical copies here at the church next week. Perhaps this specific thing is going to be hosting OWL classes at different ages. Perhaps we open those classes to the community or with other area churches. Maybe it's forming new partnerships to help out with Knox Pride or Planned Parenthood. Perhaps we look into sponsoring LGBTQ+ affirming support groups for parents, youth, and family members. I don't have those answers. No one single person does. It takes the work of the community as a whole. And I cannot overstate enough how much I'm looking forward to the results of those surveys. All of that information about what we are willing to do will be coming together, will be collated and presented to the Board of Trustees, who will have the final decision on what actions to take. The Welcoming Congregation Renewal Team is always looking for new members that can help organize our different events and activities to ensure that Westside is a safe place for all individuals and to make sure that we are taking action on issues that matter to us as a congregation. We've historically been focused on renewing the welcoming congregation status, and we will be opening up and expanding a little bit more to look at the different, like I said, issues and actions that we can take. And I encourage you all, if you're interested in joining and being a part of that, please talk to one of us. We would love to have you. Before we can do any of this work in affecting change, we have to listen. We need to listen to the voices often left out of the common discourse. We have to listen to those whose rights are being restricted and those most in danger. We have to listen to those who are hurting and who are not sitting in this room with us right now. I can't tell you how we fix it all. Like I said, no single person can. Together, though, perhaps we can listen to one another, learn from one another, and find ways to build a better community for all people, regardless of their gender identity, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, creed, or lack thereof, housing status, employment status, or anything else that separates us. Because when we get down to it, each of us has that inherent worth and dignity. Each of us have the right to live our authentic lives and be on our own unique journey in this world. And none of us should ever have to do it alone. Thank you. Our closing song today is another one of my favorites. It reminds us of the beauty in each of us and the humanity in each of us. This will be in our Teal hymnal, number 1053. Please stand as you're willing and able. This is How Could Anyone Ever Tell You? And we'll be singing it twice through. Our closing words today will be presented by Barry.
Our closing words are from the Reverend Jim McCall. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in mindless oblivion. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go without challenging yourself and others. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in utter ease and comfort. When I say go in peace, I mean go in peace seeking justice. I mean go in peace committed to equal rights and opportunities for all. When I say go in peace, I mean go in the peace that is created when together we build communities of true solidarity, deep compassion, and fierce, unrelenting love. Go in peace.